Last week, we had Kamala Harris meltdown on television with the interview with Brett Baier, where she was asked serious questions. Donald Trump worked a shift at a McDonald's drive-thru, and we're going to take a look at exactly how your money is being spent in hurricane relief efforts by the CBP and the Biden-Harris administration. Welcome to Principled Politics, and today we're going to cut through the commentary. Starting with this headline, I know I'm a little late to the game, and this is probably old news by now, but I figured we'd take a second to look at it. This was an utter disaster. And, I've read some headlines and I've read some things recently explaining that the Kamala Harris camp is basically in full meltdown mode. Kamala Harris is crashing. Kamala Harris is coming to a standstill here in this campaign. And we knew this, right? We understood that Kamala Harris was a very weak candidate. She's never run a full, strong campaign before in her lifetime. She's never run a successful campaign, especially when her presidential campaign in 2020 came to an utter stop, and she dropped out before the first primary even took place. All those things we knew, okay? And so when it came to her becoming a candidate here, it was all based off the vibes, based off the joy. And so this past week, last week, we had Kamala Harris do something shocking. And things had to be tense in order for her to take place of this. And what took place was that Kamala Harris sat down for an interview with Fox News's Brett Baier. Now, this interview went pretty bad, a lot worse than I suspected it would have gone. And what we'll do here is we'll take a look at some of the clips and how the interview went with Brett Baier. But continuing with my point before we get into that, looking at Kamala Harris, there have been insider reports reporting that things are collapsing on the inside of her campaign. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that there is actually a report of Kamala Harris calling up one of her managers and chewing them out over the phone so bad that this person began to cry and be visibly upset, and Kamala Harris was cussing them out and was just over the hedge with how poorly this person has been doing in her eyes. So I think it's safe to say that the joy is gone. Things have gotten real. Kamala Harris is realizing that she can't win this race just purely off of vibes and joy like how she was hoping. She was truly hoping that she could go all the way from being nominated to the election without having to articulate any thoughts about real life policy issues to the American people or answering any real questions, and that would be enough to get her elected as president. Now, I feel really good right now because I'm starting to get the sense that Americans are actually paying closer attention and actually have a lot more pride in themselves as Americans than I originally thought, and I will apologize for that right here on the front end. I have been under the notion that American culture has been in decline, which I still do believe it is in decline in many areas, but I was curious to see if we really had fallen to a point where we could let a politician get to the presidency without articulating any thoughts simply because we had become so dull of a culture. And I'm really grateful to find out that we have not gotten to that point in our culture, and we actually still do uphold some value and some dignity in the fact that we want our candidates to answer tough questions, and that is what things are showing at this point when it comes to this race. When it comes to all the polling and taking a look at it here, there has virtually been no major shifts that have taken place since this interview. However, we do see that there is still this underlying tie going on here and this underlying shift that you can see in basically the narrative, in things that are happening. And you can see this in the fact that the media is starting to panic in a lot of their interviews. You can see them starting to worry when it comes to whether or not this was a good decision. And you even see this between Obama and Biden. There's been a clip that was out. I won't show it here, but there was a clip out showing that supposedly that Biden had spoken the words to Obama saying that I'm stronger than her, that this was a mistake, and Obama saying, I know, basically, and is the gist of it. So we'll hop right into this. We're going to start here in the very beginning. This is right early on in the interview. And the conversation just goes off the rail immediately as Brett Baier comes right out of the gate and hits her with a question about immigration. So let's take a look at that clip here.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a number, do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a
an
rough
immigration
estimate of 6 million people
that
have been
needs to be
released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came.
So when you look at that clip there, one thing that stands out to me is the fact that Kamala Harris immediately evades the question, and then she does something by saying, "Come on, Brett, let's just get to the point here. We have a broken system." She did the exact opposite of getting to the point. She evaded the point. She literally went away from the point to make her own point. And this is the type of stuff that I truly believe, and I'm just being optimistic here. I feel optimistic. I feel good about things. And, you know, this isn't usually typical of my style. But with the way that things are going for Kamala Harris, in the fact that she is being super dodgy, just in this whole interview, you'll see she just refuses to answer any of the questions. She has her pre-scripted lines, and she sticks to those things. She has no adaptability. And she refuses even to acknowledge the fact, you know, the right thing would be to say, you know what, yes, Brett, you know, there was an issue. We made a mistake. But I can tell you right now that I'm going to do things differently than Joe. I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to be harder on the border. I'm going to make those promises. But of course, she would never do that because she actually doesn't believe those things. And she's trying to evade those things to continue to stick to her liberal mindset without fully giving in to these promises that she's going to make. Just plain politics as usual. So she literally does the opposite of getting to the point. She evades the point. She goes out of her way to make her own point that is completely irrelevant and doesn't even address the issue at hand. Now, continuing along that same vein, further in the interview, Brett Baier brings up the fact that Kamala Harris has had a record of supporting sex changes for inmates who are, you know, convicted already and they are in jail. And she has supported in the past saying that she would support sex changes for these individuals. And so here's Brett Baier bringing up that issue and actually playing the clip for her, which is hilarious. So let's take a look at that.
This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing, you know, stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that he never advocated for that prison policy and no gender transition surgeries
you know what, you got to take responsible for what happened
presidency.
in your administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in his presidency.
It's in
so
black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassignment surgeries?
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads trying to create a sense of fear in the voters because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people. Whereas At $20 million on that ad, on an issue that, as it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote.
So there's a lot there to break down. And this is where things just really, I mean, from the get, you could tell things were really going off the rails. But especially with this, I mean, you can really see there's a lot of stuff here that is definitely going to be Trump ads for the next however many days until the election. So first and foremost, this whole idea, right, where she says that, oh, Trump did this, Trump did it too, doesn't even answer the question, right? I mean, it's like playing the game of well, they did it. Well, he did it first, so it must be okay. Or they did it, so, and it's just silly. It's childish. It doesn't actually address the issue at hand. But besides that, right, her making the claim, right, and this should be an ad from now until Kingdom Come, her making the claim saying, you got to take responsibility. I mean, I got to put this on a t-shirt. You got to take responsibility for what happens during your administration. I don't think she understood the irony at this point. I'm sure she knows it now, maybe not, but the fact that she said that on television, you got to take responsibility for what happened under your administration. That has literally been the opposite of her game plan. Her whole plan for this whole entirety has been to do the opposite, to not take responsibility for her administration, to actually run away from her administration, to act like she's not the incumbent. And it's insanity. I mean, if anyone's paying attention, if you're like me, it drives me insane. The fact that she can get away with this and the media is not doing their job in holding her accountable for what's happened under her administration. We've had migrant crime, like Trump talks about. We've had people, young girls and people who've been slaughtered at the hands of illegal immigrants. We've had an economic downturn like we've never seen. 40-year high inflation. I mean, the list goes on, and I write about a lot of these things on our website, dissecting the problems of this administration, right? War starting, all these things. Yet she takes no responsibility for any of these things. Yet at the same time, it's like a paradox, right? She says she takes no responsibility, but at the same time, months ago, she said, I was the last one in the room. I had the final say with Joe Biden. Where's that attitude now? So someone needs to remind her of that and allow her to actually answer these questions instead of disrespecting Brett Baier and disrespecting the American people by having this chagrin attitude and approach to this interview. And you can just see it. And we will continue to see this as we progress through. So moving on here, another portion of this interview. This next portion, along the same line of speaking about Kamala Harris, and Brett Baier brings up the point saying, you have been the vice president. You've been in office for the past 4 years. Would you do anything differently? Or are you responsible, like you're saying, for this administration? So let's take a look at that.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days.
So basically, long story short is, yes, I will do exactly everything that Joe Biden did. Everything she articulates is nothing new. And the fact that she can't articulate, besides saying I have a different body than Joe, that's literally the only thing she can actually say is I physically am not Joe Biden, and she can't come up with anything else, is astonishing. And so this whole point she makes, she spews on like this and says, well, yeah, I have all these plans and these ideas, and I'm new, I'm younger, I'm from a new generation. Those are all just buzzwords and default sentences that she's memorized, but they actually don't describe why she's different. And we may never get that answer. We may never receive that, but I guarantee you, if she's elected, we will find out that actually it may be a different than the Joe Biden presidency, but not in the way in which maybe people think. It may be different in the fact that she may be completely 10 times more extreme and radical than Joe Biden, which is a pretty, big ceiling to crash through, to break through, considering that it's Joe Biden. He's a literal puppet for the Democratic Party. So moving on in the interview. So we have two more clips here. We'll end with these two. The next one, it's probably my favorite moment, one of my favorite moments from the interview. Kamala Harris is going on this rant, and she basically makes the point of saying, you know what I'm talking about, Brett. You know what I'm talking about. And his response is fabulous. So let's take a look at Brett Baier's response to Kamala Harris making the point, saying, you know what I'm talking about, Brett. Here it is.
Exhausted of Brett.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam Vice President.
You and I both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
people have become.
But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, frankly.
That part just made me so happy. I mean, that was by far the most embarrassing part of the entire interview for Kamala Harris. Besides the next part I'm about to play for you, that was pretty embarrassing as well. I guess it's just safe to say the whole thing was a complete and utter disaster. But this whole thing, right, she doesn't even address the concern. It doesn't even put anybody at ease, right? 79% are saying that the country's on the wrong track. And then she goes on the spiel of saying, and Donald Trump has been running for how many? It's not even relevant to. She just completely evades the statistic, doesn't address it, doesn't explain that maybe there's some concern there that's valid, but she is a different person. She's leaving the Joe Biden policies behind, and she's a new way forward. She's not even promoting that in any way, shape, or form. And Brett Baier just has a great response. You can see the look on his face. She says, you and I both know what I'm talking. And he says, I have not a single clue what you're spewing about, woman. So that was probably one of the most embarrassing moments. One of my favorite moments. Really just showed her incompetence on full display. This was towards the end of the interview, and this is really where she fell off her rocker and lost her cool. Let's take a look at that.
Talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
Yeah, she got angry. And supposedly there was reports even that came out afterwards, I don't know how legit they are, that she afterwards was extremely pissed and was furious at her team for making her do this interview because her team thought that this was a great idea. So in conclusion, after 20 something odd minutes of dodging questions, becoming visibly angry and rambling on Fox News, it's safe to say that this has been a pretty big hit to the campaign. It has exposed a lot of weaknesses, and I think it's really, 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 really the first time that Kamala Harris has taken such a grilling, and you can see the effect it has on her. I can't imagine that she would survive any campaign where the media actually forced her to take hard questions, to be grilled by them. And that's a sad reality of this campaign. It's a sad reality of where the media has gone at this point in time. They are completely safeguarding her. They're completely 100% on her side and just trying to do everything they can to promote their political agenda as opposed to promoting the agenda of truth and just reporting on the media like how the media is supposed to do. So that's basically the coverage of that interview. It was a good one, and it definitely caused quite the stir in the Kamala Harris camp. And so, with voting already taking place in many states, early voting, mail-in voting, and November 5th just right around the corner, it is going to be a tight one. But I have an underlying gut feeling, a good feeling, that things are starting to shift in the right direction for Team Trump, and that Kamala Harris is really crumbling under the pressure and the weight of this campaign because, like I said, she's never had to run a campaign. This is the longest campaign. I won't say it's the longest campaign she's run. It's the longest campaign for president she's ever run because she's never run for president. She's never run for president successfully. So let's continue to do our work here, and we'll continue to go out and make sure people go out and vote. Tell your family, friends to vote, and make sure you yourself get out and vote this election. Moving on to our next headline. So this past week, Donald Trump, in honor of Kamala Harris's job at McDonald's, did a great political stunt. One of the best things I've seen. And basically, Donald Trump and his team took it upon themselves to put Donald Trump through a shift at McDonald's to emphasize the point that Kamala Harris is not for the working class people, and also that there might be a high chance that the story of her working at McDonald's might be fabricated. So let's take a look here at the clip and the videos that surfaced around this. I'll play a few of them, and then we'll just give some quick comments about how amazing this whole thing has been for the Trump team.
I'm looking for a job, and I've always wanted to work at McDonald's. I never did. I'm running against somebody that said she did, but it turned out to be a totally phony story. So, President Trump! Well, that's a good-looking group. Hello, everybody. Crazy. I'm having a lot of fun here, everybody. Look at all the fake news of it. But I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again.
Thank you.
Look at that. Look at that. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Nice to see you.
You made it possible for ordinary people like us to meet you.
You're not ordinary.
I mean, thank you so much
You
for
are not
everything you're
ordinary.
doing.
I can see.
We pray for you, and you are the type of person we want to be the president.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So nice. Thank you very much. Yeah, I took a bullet. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. President.
When you think about it, I guess that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, you actually have worked at McDonald's now versus...
Now I have worked at McDonald's. I've now worked for 15 minutes more than Kamala.
Are you going to put this on your
I
resume?
never worked here.
Why would she lie about
15 minutes
something
more than
like that?
Kamala.
Will it be put on your resume?
Worked at McDonald's.
Why would she lie about that?
Why? Because she's lying Kamala, that's why.
So that's the story. I mean, it was a great stunt. It did very well, made great headlines, and I think it truly is just one of those things where it's very Trump, right? It's very one of those things that he does, and it's a part of his charisma and his aura, and it's a great thing. I think it'll have definitely some good waves as far as an impact. But I think people appreciate these kind of things. I know that personally I've heard of people, just commenting and saying, this, is just a whole social media kind of frenzy, and it causes a lot of buzz, and it's a good point to prove. Right, Kamala Harris doesn't go out of her way to do these things. Kamala Harris stays out of the sight of the media. She doesn't put herself in these uncomfortable situations. She has a very rigid system about the way she goes about her politics, and it clearly isn't doing much good for her at this point in time. She is tied neck and neck with a supposed traitor of the state and a man who wants to be the next Hitler and Mussolini. So we'll continue to bring updates when it comes to the election, everything going on. Those are the two most recent things. Obviously, there's other little interviews and stuff happening here and there with Kamala and with Donald Trump. But the main point is to be made that currently, I mean, the momentum, just from, and this is all an opinion, the momentum from what I can see, Kamala Harris has this disaster interview. Trump has this great photo op opportunity to work at a McDonald's, prove a point. The momentum is really, really starting to shift in favor of Trump. And if Kamala doesn't do anything soon, that can just continue to be the case. And we really could see something of a landslide happen if, those key crucial elements fall right into place. But at the end of the day, it is still a very, very close election. And like I said, we'll continue to keep you guys updated on all the latest with the election as we see everything happen. But don't forget to go out and vote. So ending here, there's a few comments I want to make. One of the things also pertaining to the election that I forgot to mention has to do with the Al Smith dinner. Now, the Al Smith dinner is a Catholic-held event that has to do with... So I forgot to mention this earlier. I wanted to mention it now because I do think it is critical. Something else happened with the Kamala Harris camp, and it has to do with the Al Smith dinner. Now, what is the Al Smith dinner? Okay, I'll give you a brief definition here. The Al Smith dinner is an annual charity event hosted in New York City by Alfred Smith Memorial Foundation, named after Alfred E. Smith, the first Catholic nominee for President of the United States and a four-time governor of New York. The event is held to raise funds for Catholic charities that support underprivileged children and other charitable causes. The dinner is traditionally attended by leading politicians, business figures, and members of the Catholic clergy. It is known for being a lighthearted, nonpartisan event where speakers, including high-profile politicians, especially presidential candidates, deliver humorous speeches, often poking fun at themselves, their opponents, and current political events. Since its inception in 1945, the Al Smith dinner has become a major event in political calendar, especially during the U.S. presidential election years. Now, the last time that a presidential candidate did not attend the Al Smith dinner was in 1984, and that was the Democratic nominee Walter Mondale. He declined the invitation, and the result for Walter Mondale in 1984 was that he got his butt whooped. He faced a resounding defeat against the incumbent President Ronald Reagan. Mondale only won one state, which was his home state of Minnesota, and the District of Columbia, securing just 13 electoral votes, and Reagan had a landslide of 525 electoral votes, the largest electoral margin victory in U.S. history. Now, I bring up this point because it actually turns out that Kamala Harris this year decided to skip the Al Smith dinner. So reading the article here, Harris to skip charity dinner, bucking decades-long tradition. Vice President Harris is breaking with 4 decades of political tradition by snubbing the Al Smith dinner, a charity fundraiser hosted by Catholic Archdiocese of New York. The New York Post reported on Saturday that Harris decided to skip the event. This is the first time a presidential candidate has refused the invitation to the dinner since the Democratic nominee Walter Mondale. Now, there are some speculations that this has to do with the fact that, maybe members of the LGBTQ and more liberal people of her coalition would be offended at her attending this dinner and that they would not appreciate it. So instead, what did Kamala Harris do? Kamala Harris gave us a little snippet here, a little, guess you could call it a comedy snippet. I'm not sure I would call this a comedy snippet, but let's take a look at this skit, if we can even call it that. We'll only watch the intro of it, because I can't bear to watch the whole thing here. So let's just take a look at it and see what Kamala Harris gave instead of attending for the Al Smith dinner.
Your Eminence and distinguished guests, the Al Smith dinner provides a rare opportunity to set aside partisanship.
Sorry.
Hey, what's going on? Who was that?
Oh, sorry, Mary Catherine Gallagher. Mary Catherine Gallagher. It's so nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, Mary Catherine. Right now I'm trying to record my speech for tonight's dinner.
Oh, yeah, I know. I just want to say that I'm Catholic, and tonight is one of the biggest dinners next to the Last Supper.
It is a very important dinner, and it's an important tradition that I'm so proud to be a part of.
Sometimes when I get nervous, I stick my fingers under my arms and I simmer them like that. But that's gross.
So tell me something. I'm giving a speech. Do you have some thoughts about what I might say tonight?
My feelings about what you should say tonight would be best expressed in a monologue from one of my favorite made-for-TV series.
Okay, let's hear it.
Don't you see, man? We need a woman to represent us. A woman brings more heart, more compassion. And think how smart she must be to become a top contender in a field dominated by men. It's time for a woman, bro. And with this woman, we can fly.
What series was that from?
Oh, that.
So that's just a snippet of it. The whole thing is just horrendous. It doesn't get any better. But even in that setting, right? She couldn't help but use it as a platform to just spout nonsense about being a woman, being this. And obviously we know that traditional Catholics are big on women leadership, and traditional Catholics obviously have a very big heart for having, female popes and bishops, and they believe in that. And they believe leaders should be women predominantly because that's such a big virtue that's important to them. Obviously it's not. And, at least for traditional Catholics in that sense. But, besides that, the point needs to be made that not only did she skip out, she didn't partake in the tradition. She's the first one to do it since Walter Mondale. But she sends in this weird, cringy video that depicts Catholic women and Catholic individuals as these weird, out of touch, like socially awkward, like smelling their finger, like just weird, right? And I don't know whose idea it was to write this skit necessarily, but it wasn't funny. It was just weird and disrespectful in many ways to the Catholic culture and to, this idea that these Catholic people are weirdos and all of those things. So the point needs to be made that, this is another disaster area for Kamala Harris. She's taken one L after the other, and this obviously cannot be too good. And if you believe in curses, like I very adamantly do, I'm very big into curses, and I think that they play a crucial role in politics. I think that this is definitely something that is going to play a role in the fact that, Walter Mondale is the first one to break this tradition, and there's got to be some kind of weird Catholic curse thing behind it. So I'm hoping that it stays true and that this is also another Mondale moment for Kamala Harris, and we have a complete and utter landslide disaster on her. And I hope Catholics do turn out in droves to stand up for themselves and to have a voice. And I know that there has even been statistics that majority of Christians and Catholic people actually plan to abstain from the vote this year, which I find to be very disheartening. We have a duty as citizens and as Christians to follow through on our faith and to stand up and choose the candidate that most aligns with your values. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be exactly 100%, Catholic or Christian or whatever that faith may be. But, I feel like it is the principled approach and the morally just approach to honor God through making your voice heard, to promote those values that you find so important, and to save lives at the end of the day. That is the Christian and Catholic thing to do. So moving on to our last headline here, we'll end on this. Let's take a look here. So the CBP, right? There's been major headlines involving FEMA and the controversy there, and I know I've spoken on this at length as well. But FEMA has, taken it upon itself to do an absolutely bang-up job helping with disaster relief, and the CBP is also partnering in that effort to help with disaster relief. And so let's take a look. The federal government spends trillions and trillions of dollars, right, during a year, trillions of dollars a year. And you would surely think that because of that, we'd have a very, very well-resourced and well-managed group of people if they're spending that much money. And, we spend all this money to have things like disaster relief. We spend all this money to have agents and employees who are going to be there when we need them most. So this is just an example of some of those employees and the hard work they're doing. So let's take a look here at the CBP's help when it comes to the recovery for Hurricane Milton. the worst named disaster ever, Militant, whoever came up with that one. Anyways, let's take a look. You know, that's a real inspiring bunch of individuals there. That was a real heavy log. You know, and there, you know, me and a buddy of mine were actually having this conversation today, and you know, we were talking about the pyramids of Egypt, and I was beginning to wonder, you know, I don't understand how humans could have possibly moved these huge 20,000, or not 20,000, excuse me, 20-ton cell blocks of granite across the desert to get to this location to build the pyramid. And that's something that's really like I've struggled with for a long time. But when I watched this video, it made me realize that humans are far more capable of achieving great things and coming together to, you know, move stuff and to show their physical prowess than I first originally gave credit for. So now, because of this video by the CBP, it really does make me believe that, you know, maybe the Egyptians really did build those pyramids. Maybe they were able to move those stones of granite. I mean, look at what these 14 individuals were able to accomplish with that log there. That in and of itself is a feat that is something to be rivaled. In all seriousness, I couldn't find a better video. If someone wanted to ask, okay, how efficient, or, you know, what could you show me to explain how efficient the federal government is, or what you think the federal government is like, this is the perfect video. And the fact that someone from the CBP recorded this, took the time to upload it and make a post, and thought that, what, this is it. Like, this is really going to show the American people that we are serious and that we're good at our jobs. That also shocks me as well. Not really, because I feel like they're very out of touch, but this just goes to show, okay? First off, they spent all of our money on the illegal immigrants. They hire a bunch of DEI candidates who are not good at their job. And then it takes 14 of these agents to be able to move a, at most, 10, 15-pound log 40, 50 feet to a pile of brush. It's real inspirational. It's inspirational stuff. And this is exactly why we need Elon Musk to come through and have his government efficiency agency and to just absolutely take the chainsaw to these bureaucrats and to these agents and to really cut down on the cost of these things. You figure each one of these person, okay, in this video is getting paid salary or hourly, whatever it is, by the federal government to work on our dime, and it takes 14 of them to move that log. That is probably the least efficient group of people that I've ever seen. And just put things in perspective here. Searching up here, FEMA in 2023 and 2024 approximately spent close to $941 million to support services for illegal immigrants through the SSP, which is the Shelter and Services Program. They spent $941 million on those services in those 2 years, okay? Now I'm going to give you another number here. FEMA was allocated $20 billion, allegedly, for hurricane relief in the 2024 fiscal year, yet they're making claims that they've run out of resources for this. And I think that maybe this has to do something with the fact that why they're running out of resources. If this picture, right, of the CBP doing this is a glimpse into the entire organization of FEMA and the CBP, I think it's safe to say that our money is not going the distance that it should be. 14 agents to move a log 25 feet to a pile of branches just goes to show that these people are lazy, incompetent, and that this whole organization needs to be basically burned down and rebuilt.
Your Eminence.
we see this time and time again with these government agencies saying, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough funding. Yet time and time again, they turn out to be the least efficient, worst organizations on the planet. And, this brings me to the point, and I'll close with this, okay? A lot of people wonder why so many conservative or many people like myself are so anti government established organizations or government agencies. I take the same approach that the founders took, okay? Take, for example, the Federalist Papers. If men were angels, we would not need government. If men were angels, we wouldn't need to be governed by other men. And if the people who were in government were angels, we wouldn't need to have checks and balances in place to control that. And I think the same truth extends to many other things. When it comes to my trust in the federal government's ability to take care of me, my family, to take care of just everyday Americans, it is at an all-time low. These people are not angels. They are not responsible. And many of them simply only care about themselves. That's why we've seen reports of FEMA and other agencies indulging in luxurious vacation stays, such as in Hawaii and many other places, while they're supposedly there to offer support and relief. It's just below them to stay in a Motel 6 while people literally have just had their homes either burned or absolutely flooded, yet they get to stay in the nice hotels while these people only get $700 a piece. It's absolutely disgraceful, and it's something that we need to fix and address in the next administration, and I can guarantee you that if it's a Kamala Harris administration, that problem will not get fixed. So, I do not have the ability to cancel FEMA or the CBP, but I will end this episode by saying that these lazy hacks have to be some of the most useless organizations on the planet. We need better run organizations. We need a better funded and ran government in order to sustain this in the long term. We can't keep spending like this, and we can't keep letting the government request this money and not actually using it to its fullest potential. So thank you for watching and or listening. That'll do it for our show today. And don't forget to stay principled.